everyone. My name is Sumaya Abu Saleh. I am the GA for C# course for this semester, and I will be explaining today database programming. In most environments, all our data is stored in a database. Therefore, we should know how to get the data from a database, how to display data from a database, and how to interact with the database, and how to create an application where data can be retrieved stored. In this lecture, we will learn fundamental concepts of databases and how do we write C# program to access and manipulate data in the database. For example, if we have our application, which is C# program that we have written, and it is running on our computer, also we will have a database server, which can be on the same computer that has our C# code or on a separate computer. Typically, database resides on a server, which is a separate entity from a personal computer. Typical database code will go through the following steps. So I will explain the steps in a plain English. Step number 1, we need to select a driver provider to talk to the database. Many drivers have been available to us over the years. For example, approximately 30 years ago, there was a driver called ODBC driver, which stands for Open Database Connectivity. We don't want to change our code if tomorrow we change from one database to another. Therefore, the driver will go through and then it will talk to the database. So we might have different databases on the server machine. For example, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Sybase, or DB2. For example, if we are talking to Oracle database and if we are using ODBC technology, we can go to the Oracle website and download the Oracle driver and then writing our code to communicate to Oracle via ODBC driver for Oracle. Tomorrow, if we switch from Oracle to MySQL, all what we have to do is change our driver. Therefore, our code will not change unless we are writing some special storage procedure where the different databases have their variation of the SQL language. But for the most part, our code will stay the same. About 20 years ago, Microsoft tried to improve upon OBDC, and they give us OLEDB. So OLEDB is more recent than ODBC, and also it is a driver to talk to different databases. If we are using Oracle, we will need to download an Oracle OLEDBC provider on your machine. Then your code will be able to talk to the database through OLEDB provider. Tomorrow, if you have to talk to MySQL or SQL Server, all what you have to do is plug in a different OLEDB provider, and without changing too much code, you still will be able to talk to a different database. These days, we deal with huge data, and our data size keeps increasing every year. For example, 20 years ago, million records were considered a big data. However, these days, trillion records is considered as a big data. The objectives from using OLEDB are make the communication faster than ODBC. Second, make it more flexible. 12 years ago, when .NET came along, they tried to improve upon it, which means make it faster, make it more memory safe. Remember that .NET cannot have memory leaks. However, OLEDB was based on C++, where we can have memory leaks. These days, you have a choice of 3 drivers: ODBC, OLEDB, and managed provider. The latter is managed provider, and the latter it is the more flexible and the higher speed it is. If you have a choice, you will pick OLEDB provider, and if it is not available, you can pick the ODBC. The benefits from going through a driver is to make our code independent of the actual database. Therefore, in our database code, we will identify a driver or provider. So step one was to specify the driver or the provider that's going to talk to a database, and the benefit is we don't need to change our code if we switch from one database to another database. This is the main objective from using driver or provider. Step two, we need to specify the connection string. So as I mentioned, I'm explaining the steps that any database code will go through until we try to access the database on the server and get the data in our code and manipulate these data. So step number two, I will divide it in two parts. First, specify the connection string. So we will understand right now what's the concept of connection string. Connection string has three parts. First, name of the machine where database server resides. When you install the database server, you need to give it a name. Second, authentication information. We need to identify ourselves whenever we need to talk to the database. Example, username and a password. It is important in order to make the other side know that the user who is trying to access the database is a valid user. Authentication information is required regardless of whether database server on the same machine or on a different machine. Third part is name of database we are trying to communicate with, because one machine can have multiple databases. Example, database server may have student database, employees database, and product database. Database provides certain rules to interact with it. For example, it allows the user to read the data and modify the data and so on. So connection string has three parts: server name, authentication information, and name of database. This diagram shows the three parts of a connection string: server name, authentication information, username and password. The third part is database name. Example, if we have a user in a network with a username UBStudent and a password myUB, is trying to connect to a database called MyDB, which resides on SQL Server, and the server name is Alpha. The server ID address is 129.128.0.25. How he can write the connection string? So we define the connection string. Let's give it a name, constr. So we have first to specify the server ID, or we can specify the server name. So here I have two information. The server name is Alpha, and the server IP address is this one, because we are in a network. So I pick the server ID, and then we have to identify the username and the password. So in our example, the username is UBStudent, and the password is myUB. Then I have to identify the database name, which is like database MyDB. So for here, it can be replaced by the name of the database server. So I can write server equal alpha, semicolon, UID, UBStudent, password, myUB, database, MyDB database. Because in our scenario, we have two databases are residing on the database server, MyDB and student DB. So, and the user wants to access MyDB, so we have here to specify which database we try to communicate with. Also, if the database server on your laptop, this can be replaced by the name of the database server on your laptop. It's important to know that the parts of the connection string should be separated by a semicolon in our code. So first we have to identify the connection string. If you are working on your laptop and you have the database server on your laptop, you have to get the name. And once we install the software, I will show you how to get the name and how to write the connection string. Step 2, create a connection object and tie the connection string to it. So First, we already created a connection string. Now we will create what's called a connection object. Database may reside on same computer or in a different computer. It is basically a different program. One of the ways to communicate with another program is through TCP/IP socket. The first thing we do is establish a socket connection between our code and the database. It is like when you call somebody over the phone. Once the connection is established, then you can talk. Similarly, once we establish a connection to the database server, then we can send SQL statements such as select star from products. Then the server will reply back with the data, and we can then display the data in our application. The job of connection object is to know where to go and how to access the database. In the constructor of the connection object, we pass the connection string, and this is how we tie the connection string to the connection object. There is a class available to us for communication with SQL server called SQL connection. For this step, the typical code is one line of code. So first, we identify the parts of the connection string. The second step is to declare the connection object. So we have class for that, the class called SQL connection. This is when we try to communicate with SQL server. So the class available for us is SQL connection, and we give it a name con equal new SQL connection, and we pass the connection string in the constructor of the object. And this is how we type the connection string to the connection object. Classes that start with SQL access data in SQL server via managed provider. As we said in the very first step, that we have to choose the driver. So once we are dealing with this class, SQL connection, that means it is going via managed provider server provider. In addition, if we are trying to connect with Oracle, the SQL part, the SQL part of the SQL connection will get replaced by Oracle. So there is a class also called Oracle connection. And if we are using DB2, the class will be called DB2 connection, and so on. So first, we identify the connection string. Second, we identify the object connection. Step 3, open connection to database. To open a connection, we need to write one line of code. The connection object we created, .open, that's it. So we open a connection. Step 4, compose SQL. If we are selecting a field from the database, we will use SQL select statement. If we are inserting data into the database, we will use SQL insert statement. And if we are updating the database, we will use update statement. For example, select star from products. This is what compose SQL means. Step 5, issue SQL to database server and process result. SQL that are issuing could be insert statement, select statement, update statement, or call for stored procedure. Step 6, close the connection to the database server. To close the connection, we also need to write one line code, con.close. Among all these steps that we identify, writing connection string, then tied it to connection object, and then open a connection, issue SQL, process results, close the connection. Among all these steps, the changing in our code will be in composing SQL step and issuing SQL and processing result step. The change depending upon what we are trying to do to our database. Therefore, the code for these two steps will be different for different types of needs. As seen below, compose SQL and issue SQL and process result can be divided into 4 categories. First category, get a single answer from a database. Second category, obtain many rows or many columns from a database. Third category, insert, update, or delete data from a database. Fourth category, call a stored procedure in the database. This is the needs that we need from a database. Either single answer, or many rows, many columns, or we need to insert, update, delete, or there's a stored procedure already written on the database, and we need to delete that stored procedure or interact with that. So we have always we have 4 needs. So now we will learn how to write the code depending on the need. Suppose we have our database server and our code. At some point of time, our code will make a socket connection to the database server, and this connection object identifies which machine server we want, how to identify ourselves to the database, and what database we are interested in. And that's through the connection string, and then we type this connection string to the connection object. Once we create the connection object and pass the connection string, and then call con.open, essentially what that does is it opens a socket connection to the database server, and once the socket connection is established, then we will compose the SQL and issue SQL and process result. And that's step where we have a variation in the code. So now first category, when we try to get one single answer from the database. If you try to log in and you want to check if the username and password exist or not in the database, this is when we need single answer. So the answer will be yes or no, so in one answer. Other example, if we want to retrieve the price of a product from product table in our database, the SQL statement will be select price from product, where product ID, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what we need, one answer. In both examples, we only need one thing from our database. Regardless how complicated the SQL is, whether we are joining 10 tables or 20 tables, SQL is just a string. String is very easy to send. String doesn't require too much memory. Therefore, it is very easy to send over a socket. However, depending on what kind of data we need to return back, the data can be small, such as in the last example, where we need to return the value of the price. .NET gives us an object which capable of carrying one piece of information on the way back from the database to our code, and this object called command object. Think of command object like lightweight method, but very quick, and it can carry back one piece of information. We can think of a command object like a motorcycle. So we will create a motorcycle in our code, and we will tell the motorcycle where the connection string is. Think of the connection string like the address. So the motorcycle will know what machine he needs to go, what username and password to deliver the data to, and what database to talk to, as we may have many databases on the server. Through the motorcycle, we will also send the SQL to the database server, and it will bring back one piece of information. Both SQL and connection object, which has the server name, username, password, and database name, all these information is a complete information to access the database. This diagram shows how the command object will establish the connection between our code and the database server. So command object will have two information, the SQL we issue and the connection object. The SQL, what SQL we want to carry to the database, and connection object which has connection string information, server name, username and password, and database name. So this command object, let's give it a name, CMD, will establish this connection to the database, and then it will bring from the database one piece of information. This will bring the value of the price. So if the SQL was select price from product where price ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So this is the first approach, when we need only to get one piece of information or get one answer from database. We are going to identify command object. Now let's see how to write the code, what line of code, and next lecture we will write the actual code using the database SQL Server. Our typical code, if we want a single answer from the database, we will start at con.open. This is to open the connection to the database. Then we will identify the SQL statement. For example, string SQL select price from products where product ID equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we need to create the command object. The motorcycle, we need to create that and give it a name. For example, CMD. If we are communicating with SQL Server, the class name will be SQL command. We need to give two pieces of information to the command object, which is SQL and connection object, which tie to the connection string that carry the information that we need to SQL Server. So we have class, SQL command, CMD, new SQL command, and we will tie it to SQL and connection object. Now for this part, it can be vary, and it depends on which database we are communicating with. If we are communicating with Oracle, then the class here will be Oracle command.
Excuse me?
So the change only on this part. And if we are communicating with DB2, the class will be DB2 command.
Yeah.
Now our typical code will, so let's continue. So first, in the first slide, we open the connection, we issue the SQL, and here we will tie the SQL, the connection string to the connection, to the command connection. And now we issue the call. The command object will submit our request to SQL Server. The command object will pick one thing and bring it to us and store it in the object. We need to invoke a method called execute scalar method. It is simple method where scalar means 1. So we will write object obj equals cmd.execute scalar. Then we need to process the result. So as I mentioned, we open the connection, we open the connection, and we identify the SQL statement that we need, and the connection string. We type the connection string to the connection object. We give it two information, which is SQL and connection. And then here we need to issue the call. We will use method called execute scalar. And then we will process the result. We process the result, we read the price. Here we read the price and we convert it to a double. If the product ID was 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 doesn't exist, it will give us null. So let's pretend that this product which have this ID does not exist. So the motorcycle or the command object will bring us null. So before we process our data, the result, we should check that obj is not equal to null. So we don't blindly try to convert it to string because it will generate a runtime error. So first we have to check if this obj does not equal to null, and then we will process the result. Because this is object, like CMD is object, and the price is double, so we have to typecast it to double. And once we're done, we close the connection. Okay, is there any question?
Yeah. For the Oracle driver and DB2 driver, does Visual Studio provide that driver with, or do we have to install?
Okay, so what we are going to use in this semester for the class, SQL Server. SQL Server, and I will give you instruction at the end of this presentation, what we need and what the requirement for that software, and try to have it ready for next lecture, so you can write with me the code. But I explain in general. Let's say if you are using Oracle or you are using DB2 or any kind of database, all what you have to do the first part from the class. Like if we are using SQL command, you can separate SQL with Oracle
So
command.
that class are already present in dot
Yes,
Visual.
it's already there. So it depends on what database you are using, and it will communicate directly
Yep.
with the database via
Using-
managed provider. So we already know that the motorcycle always will bring one piece of information. So let's have different scenario. If the product table will have a lot of rows and columns, what will happen if our SQL in the same code was SQL equal select start from product where product ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So select start. That means we need all rows, all column for that product ID. Will the code throw an error?
No,
What do you think?
no, it will not.
There is any answer? The answer is no. It will not throw an error. Database has multiple rows and multiple columns. However, the command object will pick the first row and the first column and bring it back to us and ignore the rest, because the motorcycle or command object can only carry one piece of information. So even though if we write select start, we need all the rows, all the column, it will go and bring only the first row and the first column, one entry. If each product in the product table in the database has 10 columns, it's supposed to give us 10 pieces of information. If we write select start from product where product ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when we invoke execute scalar, we said that with command we write cmd.execute scalar. This is the method that it will bring one entry. The way that execute scalar designed is only to give us the first one, regardless of if the server is giving us 10 pieces of information or one piece. The way it's designed to bring only one piece of information. So in this case, we will get the value of the first row and the first column, whatever it happens to be. If it happens to be that the price, we will get the price, this value. If the first row and the first column happen to be product ID, then we will get the product ID, because the statement was select start, so we didn't mention. We need everything, all the column. So whatever the first column was, we will retrieve this information. So if it happens the first column is the price, we will retrieve the price. If the first column is the ID, product ID, we will retrieve the product ID. Okay, so for the first scenario, or for the first need, when we need to get one piece of information or one answer from the database, which object we are going to use?
Execute scalar.
Execute scalar is the method. The object,
CMD.
command object, that the motorcycle command object. So first we will open the connection, we will write the SQL, and we will specify the connection string where we write the server name, username, ID, and the database. So now we have SQL, we have the connection string. So we type this connection string to the connection object. And then on that object, we call execute scalar, so it will bring for us one piece of information, and then we close the connection. So it's very straightforward, it's very easy. Now the second need, if each product in the product table, how do we explain this? What if we want to bring more than one row and column from the database? Will the motorcycle be able to carry all large amount of data? The answer is no, because command object has been designed in a way it can only store one piece of information. Therefore, we need a flexible data structure so that we can retrieve many rows and many columns. Instead of creating a command object for this need, we will have to create another object that .NET make it available for us, called data adapter object. Think of data adapter like a truck, which can bring a lot of heavy load. Data adapter will bring back from the database server all rows and columns that we ask for. So this is the truck. Same thing, we will identify the SQL and the connection string. We open the connection, we give the SQL and connection object, which tied to the connection string, and then we give these two pieces of information, in this case for an object called data adapter. It will go to the database. See, we need all this information. We need last name, first name, address, and city for 3 users. And then data adapter can carry all that information and bring it back to us. In case we need to retrieve many rows and columns, our typical code will look like the following statement. First, we open the connection, so it's the same. We create SQL, string SQL select star from product. So this time we need star, we need all the data. And we already identify the connection string. So we will create, in this scenario, we'll create data adapter object. So instead of command object, in the first need here, we create data adapter object. So we have two kinds of object. Command object, data adapter object. So we create data adapter object. If we are working with SQL Server, the same thing. The data adapter called SQL data adapter. And if we are working with Oracle, the data adapter will be called Oracle data adapter. And if we are working with DB2, it will be called DB2 adapter. We still need to send 2 pieces of information with SQL and connection object. We should specify what SQL to carry to the server and what connection to tell the data adapter object where to go. Connection object, as I said, it's like an address. So when we use it with command object or data adapter, it's like you telling the motorcycle or the truck where to go, what's the username and the password we need to deliver the data to, and what database we need to communicate with. In .NET, there is a pre-built class called data table, which is very flexible and can store many rows and many columns. It's dynamically expand and shrinks. So what we need to do first, we need to create a blank data table. So now the truck went to the database and bring all the information that we need. And then we need to create blank data table DT, give it a name, DT, new data table. And then we will call a method called fill. How we call execute scalar for command object. Here we need to call a method called fill. So what this statement do? Data adapter has the method fill. As soon as we execute the following statement, when we see DA data adapter, we give it a name DA dot fill DT, and DT is the blank data table. Technically, at this point of time, when we execute this statement, the truck or data adapter will go to the database server, deliver the SQL, and bring back all the rows and all the columns in the machine memory. So it will be on the memory of our computer. Essentially, DA.fillDT will transfer all the data and dump it into our data table. So fill will dump the data in the data table. Where is the data table? In our machine memory. So okay, we create data adapter. The data adapter went to the database and bring all the columns, all the rows we need. And now when we call this method, we have to create data table. It's blank, and then it's like the structure. It's blank, it's ready, and then when we call this method, it will dump all the data in this table. And then we can close the connection. We don't need it. And then we will have all the information on the data table. And then after that, once we have the information in data table in the memory of our computer, and then we can look through all the rows and all the columns and get the data. Like we can create, I will show you next lecture, a grid view, and we can display all the rows and all the columns that we brought from the database. Yeah.
Closing the connection.
Yeah.
Would it be more proper to close it after every time you execute a SQL statement, or would it be like accessing a file?
As soon you close it after you call the fill.
Well, my question really is, does it like block the connection? Does it block the database if you have open connection?
See, the thing is, you mean if you close the connection?
If the connection stays open, does it like...
Okay, let's say if you have so much users and all these, it's a proper way to close it after you finish. Because if we are in a network and the database we have like a lot of users are working, this will be too much load. So it's better to close the connection.
Okay.
Yeah. This
So
is
every time you want to execute a SQL statement, you reopen the connection, then close it.
yeah. Every time. So we will write we will write this in our code. So every time you run the code, you will open the connection, and then it will go through all the steps, and you will close it, because these statements will be in our code. And when we work, we will install SQL Server, and you will have the server already installed in your server. I mean, the server will be database server will be on your laptop, and they will have this ready. If you don't have tables, you have to create tables, and then you write your code, and you will get the result in C#. Yeah. Okay, so here, as we see, we dump all the data in the data table in the memory.
The data which we fetch, that will be an object, right?
The object will bring the data.
Yeah.
But for this
that
object,
will be stored as object in the.
Yeah, we have two objects. If we are looking for single answer, the object will be called command object, CMD. If we are trying to get many rows, many columns, the object will be data adapter.
No. I'm asking that the values which we fetch from the database and we store that value. That stored value will be object.
Yeah, I just
So
show
we all
you
the
in
data
the
tables.
exam. Let's say you are looking for a price. Price is double. So you need. What we bring is the object. We need to cast
Then
it
we
to
type
double.
in type cast it.
Yeah, we cast it to double, because when we need to process the price on our computer, on our code, so the price is double. But what we have is an object. So we need to typecast it. Yeah. So here, summary for the difference. .NET give us an option of two kinds of object for the amount of data in the way back. One which can carry one piece of information back from the database to our code, and this object called command object. The second which can carry multiple rows and columns, and this object called data adapter object. So the motorcycle can only bring one box, whereas the truck can bring many boxes, and the truck is data adapter and the motorcycle is command object. The third need that sometimes we need to insert, update, or delete to the database. Let's take this question. In case of insert, update, or delete from the database, should we send lightweight object to the database server, which is command object? I call it lightweight because it's only bring like simple one piece of information. Or should we send a heavy-duty truck to database server, which data adapter can bring many boxes? What do you think? The answer is here. In order to answer this question, we should know what kind of reply does the database will give for us if we issue an insert statement, update statement, or delete statement. For example, if you issue a delete statement to delete 20 rows from the database, the reply will be 20 rows were modified or were deleted. And this let us know that 20 rows got affected. The reply is a single number. We need to get one piece of information. Based on that, the answer is motorcycle will work, and we should use a command object. If we modify 1,000 records on the database, even though the modification on the database server is huge, the reply will always be a number. 1,000 got modified. Also, if we issue an insert statement to the database, it does reply the number of records that were affected. So the reply is a number. We will create a command object because the reply will be one answer. So in this scenario, we will create command object, and the constructor will give it the SQL and the connection object. Remember, previously we did call the execute scalar, which will bring one item. Now in this category, the category where we need to insert, update, or delete, we will invoke a method called execute non-query. Execute non-query to distinguish between the first category and the third category. So we still, all the steps are the same. We still will create command object because the reply is only one, how many records were affected, so it's a number. But for the difference is for command object, we used to call execute scalar. Now we call a method called execute non-query. And this is how the .NET will distinguish that this is insert, update, delete category or the first category. Therefore, through the command object, we say like int rows, we will get like an integer cmd.execute non-query. Doesn't matter whether it is a delete statement, whatever SQL we give, or update statement or insert statement. This statement tells us how many rows are affected by insert statement or update statement or delete statement. Fourth category, this is the last category, call a stored procedure. Stored procedure, it's not really a separate technique because stored procedure could be simply giving us one answer. Stored procedure could bringing back many rows and many columns. Stored procedure could be doing an insert, update, to delete. So depending upon what the stored procedure is doing, we will pick one of the three techniques I just explained. Further, we will either create a command object or create data adapter. This is the only two objects we have. Command object, the motorcycle, data adapter. If we need to get one answer, we use command object, many rows, many columns, data adapter. If it's insert, update, delete, command object. But the difference in which method we will invoke, execute non-query. For example, suppose the stored procedure is simply giving us one answer back. We should use a command object. Once we create a command object, we give it two things, SQL and connection. Connection object, which has the connection string, and we will do object obj equals cmd.execute scalar. This is if the stored procedure give us one reply or one answer. In the case of the stored procedure, what is the SQL? So the stored procedure, it's a procedure on the database. So what's the SQL? For first category, second, third, we have to write like select price from product where price ID equal 1, 2, 3, or select start from products, delete price from products where product ID 1, 2, 3. So here, what is the SQL in the case of stored procedure?
Execute that procedure. Execute statement.
Yeah. What's the SQL? What should we write? Because we know that for the command object or data adapter, you need to send two things. First, SQL, connection object. So connection object tied with connection string. We don't have problem with that. So it will tell us the server, username, password, and the database. Now, how about the SQL? The SQL will be the name of the stored procedure. The stored procedure will have a name. So simply we don't put select or insert, nothing. We only put SQL equal string, the name of the procedure. And each procedure there has a name and has a parameters also. Suppose the stored procedure we're doing insert, update, or delete. The string name of SP, like SP is the stored procedure, whatever name here. depends if the stored procedure said delete table, whatever. So you put the name here. And then we have class called SQL command, CMD new SQL command, and then we give it SQL and connection. It's the same. SQL is simply the name of the stored procedure. And then we say, like in the case of insert, update, delete, we will write object obj cmd.execute non-query. If the stored procedure is written in many rows and many columns, so instead of creating a command object, we will create a data adapter. Because we said stored procedure can bring us one information, can bring us many data, we can insert, update, and delete. Stored procedure are like functions. Functions have parameters. How do we pass these parameters? Simply name is not enough. We have to pass the parameters. So for passing parameters, we have SQL class called SQL parameter. Example. Suppose we are writing a delete to stored procedure. If it is a delete for a product class and the parameter was called PID. So SQL parameter P1 equal new SQL parameter. So this is the convention in C#. We have to put at sign, then the name of the parameter. And then the IntelliSense will give you automatically that you need to specify what type for that parameter. So first you have to identify what is the parameter for that stored procedure. Stored procedure function. It has name and between brackets it has parameters. So we, in our code we need to identify that parameter and the name. So the name is not enough. And then when you, before you specify the parameter, you have to write at sign, then the name, and then the IntelliSense will give you what type that has to be. SQL db type.int in our case. And then you write p1 with value. The IntelliSense will tell us that we have to identify what is the data type of that parameter. To summarize, in order to write a database code under .NET, we break it into 4 categories. First, get a single answer from a database. Second, obtain many rows or many columns from a database. Insert, update, or delete from a database. Fourth category, call stored procedure in a database. For that last one, I will show you next lecture how to write stored procedure and how to call it. And also I will add for this presentation and the code. So you will have the presentation which has all the definition and motivation and the code that you need to write. And I also, next lecture we will write together the code. So whatever I explained here, we will write it and we will communicate with the SQL server. And then I will post the presentation. I will ask Professor Mahmoud to post the presentation and the code on the website. The main thing is to remember we have 2 main objects to take SQL to the database. One is command object, the second is data adapter. This is the only object we need. So this is the requirement that I would like you to make sure that you have it installed on your laptop for the next class. I might give an assignment for that. So install Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio software. Go to DreamSpark. I think the instruction for accessing this website is Professor Mahmoud put it on the website of C#, the main page. So you can go there and there is, like I checked it yesterday and I found there's 3 options. You can install one of them. Can be Microsoft SQL Server 2014 Express Edition, the latest. We need Express Edition. Microsoft SQL Server 2012 Express Edition, or Microsoft SQL Server Express Edition 2008 R2. Also, I have that software. I have it on my laptop. So if you have flash drive, I can put you and install it. It's wizard to just follow. It's very easy, straightforward. This is how the software, SQL Server Management Studio software will look like. And then we will learn how to create tables, how to give types, how to communicate with that data, with our program, how to write the code. So next step will be implementation, database programming. Thank you.
Thank you.